Dr.
Yes.
DeGrofft, thank you so much for being here today as we host an AETA podcast. We have Dr. Gibbons here, Dr. John Gibbons from Texas Tech. And Dr. Gibbons, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Kelsey. My name is John Gibbons, and I'm a reproductive physiologist at the Texas Tech School of Veterinary Medicine. And I also work quite a bit with the AETA on the Education Committee and a few other committees. And most recently was elected to the board. And we have these podcasts periodically. And I think today's pretty exciting as we hear from kind of one of our founding fathers.
Yes. Congratulations on your election onto the board, by the way.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, Dr. DeGrofft, we're going to ask a few questions and try and capture some of the rich history that our organization holds and some of our, like Dr. Gibbons called you, and some of the founding fathers of our organization. So we'll get started with the first question. That being, what do you see as some of the most important contributions that you've made to the Canadian and American Embryo Transfer Associations?
Well, first of all, thanks to both you and Dr. Gibbons and to you, Dr. Savell, for inviting me to join this podcast. And I think I'll start out with the beginnings of putting our program together between AETA and CETA. And I'm not so sure that I added the majority of the situations with the company or with the associations, but certainly I had lived in Canada for 17 years, and I was certainly involved with the CETA, being on the board and as a president with that association also. So it started out with an idea that I shared with some of the AETA colleagues due to my past experience and involvement with CETA. And with the upcoming IETS meeting that was going to be held in Quebec City, Canada in 1999, it looked like we had an opportunity to further investigate the potential plans that we were talking about. The board of directors of both associations, AETA and CETA, met for a dinner meeting to consider the possibilities of future joint meetings. After further discussions, I guess we both organizations decide it was to continue to investigate the possibility of having 2 consecutive yearly meetings in the USA, followed by 1 year in Canada. The first joint conference was held in Nashville, Tennessee in 2001. And was immediately accepted as a success by all attending, as ET ideas were shared, of course, and new professional relationships were beginning. We certainly had people in Canada that were excited about coming to that meeting and joining with the US, and so it was fantastic. I think it went off really well. The partnership has continued, as you're well aware, to the present day, and in fact, the 2025 meeting will be held in October this year in Reno, Nevada, and we expect to see a good share of the ET veterinarians from Canada to join us at the time. So it'll be super.
Yep. Thank you for being one of the individuals that brought both of those associations together so we can share more scientific knowledge and network just a little bit more than we could have without them. So we appreciate
Well, it was
that.
just simply by the fact that I had been there and knew a lot of the people, knew most of the ET veterinarians, and so it was kind of apropos that we get together and put the two together, and it just hatched. It was ready to go. So
made perfect sense. Yep.
Yes.
So in your opinion, what is the biggest advancement that the ET industry has made?
The biggest or the well, I certainly believe it's common knowledge within the industry that predominant advances have been made for many years now, over the past 50 plus years. But it would include at least a few of what I think and would be major advances from back in the early 70s. We know that some of the early pregnancies in Calgary, Alberta, with Dr. Murray Jacobson occurred in the late 70s. And so the late 69s and the early 70s. So I think that some of the big advances, of course, were non-surgical ET procedures in cattle, because we were doing everything surgical at the time. And I have a few comments we can make about that. But successful freezing of bovine embryos resulting from a calf that was reported by Dr. Wilmot and Rowson in Cambridge in 1973. I think early research with cryoprotectants. I don't know how many people will remember, but we actually started freezing embryos in DMSO. And then, of course, from DMSO, it went to glycerol. And finally, what we're using today is ethylene glycol. Along about 1979, a very successful protocol for embryo freezings was presented by Dr. Uli Schneider. And that kind of set the base, I guess, for successful freezing of bovine embryos. And that occurred probably, some of the first ones were with Dr. Stan Lebo at Rio Vista Genetics in Texas. Superovulation of donors, of course, that was in the late 70s when we used PMSG, and FSH products came along later. Commercial availability for embryo splitting and sexing procedures occurred, and that, I think, opened up a whole new avenue for what we wanted to do to research a lot of things with embryos at the time. Improved superovulation products continued, of course, but albeit the mean number of transferable embryos produced per donor collected hasn't changed very much in the last 40 plus years, according to our IETA statistics. In fact, it still remains somewhere between 6 and 7 viable transferable embryos per donor collected. So we've gone a long ways and improved in a lot of areas, but that one seems to be one that we just can't get away from. It's never been below 6, and I think it's never been above 7, probably in the last, at least the last 30 years or more. So, and I think beginning of international export of frozen embryos, the frozen embryos opened up a whole new approach to what we could do internationally, of course, instead of trying to send fresh embryos. And that all occurred in the early 1980s. And of course, it opened up a huge expansion and acceptance of the ET technology worldwide, and opened new markets and economic possibilities for the companies that we already had here in the US. Couple more, sex semen research in 1974. Dr. Larry Johnson at the time was living in California, but came into Fort Collins, and initially XY Inc. in Fort Collins was set up as the sexing program, and it remained here until it was purchased by Sexing Technologies later on in Texas. Sexed embryos via the use of sex semen naturally became frontline and became very popular once we had the sex semen. Little history here. Dolly, the first nuclear transfer in England, occurred in 1997. So that we were approaching, getting up closer and closer to today's dates. Reproductive ultrasound and follicular genesis, I think, with Dr. Ginther and Dr. Greg Adams, certainly set the stage for increased ET results. I think it's helped us a great deal. Commercially produced IVF embryos for accelerated genetic improvements. Goodness sakes, look what we've done now with the sexing of IVF embryos and getting the sex that we need, particularly in the dairy industry as versus the beef, but it's important in both breeds. And transgenic and cloned embryos became a reality recently. So, and the list goes on, I guess, at this point, that those are certainly some of the advancements, and we could all probably get together with another group and spend 3 hours coming up with that information on the advancements and what it's done and how rapidly some of these things occurred. Very slow in the early days back in the 70s. Advancements didn't go very fast because we just didn't know what we were doing and how we were going to do it and how we were going to freeze embryos, and with the surgical collections and trying to get to do something that was non-surgical. So very slow, but then after about 10 or 15 years, things accelerated rapidly. Yes, so a lot of advancements. And I'm sure that I inadvertently left out a few of them that are very important to most people, but please feel free, that anyone that's watching the podcast, to contact me and correct me on the ones that I've missed out on.
Yeah, we have it pretty good nowadays, I'd say. That's pretty amazing that you've watched all of that history unfold in real time. It's pretty remarkable. It's come a long way.
It's been a fun trip, to say the least.
Yeah,
sure.
I don't doubt it. So that kind of brings us, to our next question. What do you see unfolding next for the ET industry, both, domestically in the US and as well as worldwide?
Well, I guess I'll begin with the fact that I'll state that undoubtedly trying to predict the future is a little bit of my pay grade as a practitioner, because there's many qualified researchers naturally, and Dr. Gibbons, John, you're included for sure, are continuing to fine tune many of the present technological procedures that we have. But I guess a few of my personal thoughts would be IVF procedures. We're back to that being further developed to produce embryos from young donors. I think you might give me an example on that, John. I'm not just too sure, but young heifers are now producing embryos at what age? 4, 5, 6 months?
Or younger.
Yes,
much
right.
like you would aspirate oocytes from a small ruminant. There's an approach to do that from a calf that's just, maybe a couple of months old.
Yeah, certainly. So that's going to rapidly advance the genetics, isn't it, in both our beef and dairy industries. So I think we're seeing an increased interest for sure in small ruminant reproduction. We have some of that going on right now in some fantastic sheep herds, flocks, I guess I should say, here in Colorado. Advanced genomic testing of embryos, continued research with IVF production, and increased pregnancy rates. I think if we can find some of the things there that we can have those increased pregnancy rates go up at least 15 to 20% would be certainly helpful in most people's hands. So I think that's coming. I talk to people, and you do too, that indicate that that's coming down the line. I think increased interest in endangered species reproduction and embryo transplant will undoubtedly play a part there also, and that's becoming a hot topic in places. Increased markets for embryo exports, I think, are going to really increase in the future, really backed up by being facilitated by US LGE funding. And by the way, the AET representative now for usage is Dr. Nate Dorhorst. And so if any young people are wanting to keep in touch with someone like that to get some funding and work with them for international exports, those are going to be huge. They've done very well in the last few years, covering a lot of countries. Definitely, there's some increased interest in equine ET work and reproduction in particular. I have never experienced that at all, but certainly there are areas that you can talk to a lot of people that have been in the historical part of the reproduction. Some of that was done here at Colorado State University, and certainly are the early researchers of the equine work. I asked the question, will artificial intelligence, the other AI, every time I hear artificial intelligence, I think, well, that's the other AI. Will it continue to open us new opportunities? And I would expect so. I'm not sure of all of that. I hate to think of what it may get to, but I'm excited about the fact that it may help us and open up some new avenues and new opportunities. And lastly, I guess future research in areas that we may now believe we'll never use, but inevitably, what if? And we've all been seeing many of these countless scenarios in the past 50 plus years where we'd say the research is being done in this avenue or this part of ET work, and we'll never use that in the field. We'll never be doing that out on the ranches. And guess what? We were all doing it within a short number of years. So certainly some of these will come to fruition, I'm sure. So I'd say that's some of the things that I look at for what's advancing. I'm not sure that that includes a lot of worldwide advancements, Kelsey, as you mentioned, but certainly the export of embryos and import and export of embryos is certainly going to increase, I think, internationally.
Yep,
And
it
I really
definitely
like
takes an ecosystem of minds. It takes all kinds of kinds to keep the wheels churning. Dr. Gibbons, what were you going to say?
I really like your comment about the other AI, Dr. DeGrofft, because I think there are some folks out there, at least based on some of the research proposals that the AETA has received, that are interested in that machine learning and that artificial intelligence piece. And they're coming at it from a different angle, perhaps. That's kind of their ballpark. But if it could be plugged into the embryo transfer industry, no doubt it pushes us forward. Also, the AETA Certification Committee recognizes the in vitro fertilization things that are happening now and will continue in the future, as well as the small ruminants. And we've added that to the certification exam to try to keep pace with the industry.
Yes, for sure. Yes, for sure.
we saw some great posters at the AETA conference, that really looped a lot of that AI, the other AI stuff
Yeah.
into the research that's been going on. So it's very interesting to read those.
Yes. A lot of
So
avenues for researchers today that they didn't even think about years ago. When I talked to some of the young veterinarians in the past years and indicate that I was in the transplant business for a number of years before I could freeze an embryo. And so I had to throw those embryos in the trash at the end of the day because we were out of recips. And these young veterinarians would look at me and say, "You mean you weren't freezing embryos immediately?" I said, no. I probably killed my first frozen embryos for the first 6 months that I tried to freeze embryos. I think I was pretty handy at destroying most all of them until I started finding out some new details from other people. So now it's massive, the amount of opportunities there are for research, for sure.
Yep. Thanks for paving the way for us.
Oh, well, it's been fun.
Yes, sir. So for new grads or young professionals within this industry, do you have any words of advice or maybe some things that, if I had known then what I know now, that, little tidbits you can offer them?
Well, if I'd have known when I started in the ET business that it was all surgical, and it was, nothing was non-surgical. And I was about ready to say, this has got to have an ending here pretty soon with this. It was just too complicated. It was too hard on a lot of the donors and the recipients, and time consuming and so on and so forth. Back in those days, we'd hope to collect 2 donor cows in the morning at 6 o'clock and find the embryos in 2 or 3 hours, not because we didn't have a filter, and then run 10 recips through the chute and put them under general anesthesia and transfer those embryos. And we were hoping to be done by 8 or 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And that was with 2 donors and 10 recips. I've been there. I couldn't even envision that what we are doing today by rapidly as we can collect cows and transfer embryos. But I guess for young veterinarians, of course, becoming proficient, I put down with artificial insemination, our AI, instead of the other AI, through training and experiences, I think is definitely needed before you start to walk into too much of the embryo transplant world. Continue to develop expertise in palpation skills of the cow reproductive organs. That gets to be very pertinent, naturally. Possibly attend the AABPET school that's held each year for practicing veterinarians. And so people that have been out and done a little bit of work with ET, with the ET industry, certainly that I've participated only in one of those AABP schools, but they're fantastic. I think people have a chance to collect embryos, search for embryos, transfer, freeze, do the whole thing. It's amazing in the 2 or 3 days that what they can learn at that school. Externships within the industry with veterinarians that have already got practicing are practicing the industry, the ET industry. Certainly they're very interested and quite rewarding at times. John and I have had a little visit about that just recently. It's hard to find sometimes to get these externships from these students that are seniors in vet school or new grads, but I think they're certainly rewarding. As John has mentioned, consider the AETA mentoring and scholarship programs available to advanced students and to new grads. John, you can certainly have assistance with people that would like to learn more about that. In fact, a note is that at our last meeting in Toronto last year, there was 11 scholarships awarded at that time. So it's gotten to be a huge portion of what we try to do within the AETA for new graduates, I guess mostly graduate veterinarians, but there's certainly a lot of people that are still in vet school. They're just getting to learn. Well, I think the posters do a lot in that regard because of look at what comes out of the universities for the research there, and these young people can set up those posters and we can all learn from that at every meeting. So I think that's good advice as I see it in the industry. Certainly anybody that's, we need that. I guess I would say that this podcast was kind of intended to include information for these young people and young veterinarians interested. And we wanted to include a bit of ET history, some of the past advances that have occurred in the last 50 plus years now, and the future possibilities for our profession. And anyone that has an interest, of course, in providing and continuing to provide embryo transfer services, not only at home, but internationally, because I think it's going to continue. Certainly it's going to continue internationally too. So we definitely need qualified veterinarians to continue in the footsteps of those that have assisted in blazing the trail in the past. And I think we've got a young group of people that we meet at every meeting on both sides of the border, CETA and AETA, that are anxious to learn more, all they can learn, and get back into practice with the ET work. And I certainly have had some young people that have helped me out over the past few years that have been in practice for 3 or 4 or 5 years, and they're fantastic. They've helped me. I've learned from them. They've assisted me when I had problems that I couldn't get my arm organized to get into a cow due to an injury. And my goodness, I was pumping them for more information than they were for me. So I enjoyed their input too, fantastically.
Yep. Well, that's great. We thank you so much for your time and the opportunity to document, preserve some of our industry's rich history, and just once again, very, very thankful for your time and effort, and really enjoyed this.
Oh, well, you're more than welcome, and thank you for having me work with you. Yes, I appreciate
it. Dr. Gibbons, do you have any closing remarks?
I don't really think so. I've really enjoyed this as well. A lot of good information, a lot of where do we go next kind of things. And yeah, it's an exciting time.
Good deal. Well, thank you both, and we will catch you guys on the next one.
You bet. Thanks, Kelsey. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Thanks for putting it together, guys. Yeah.